Welcome to 3 Minute Warning, a Canadian Football League podcast and member of the All Sports, All Plays Network. My name is Dallas Bergen at CFL Fans Toronto, and I'm with Bill Beer, Pigskin Punk 13. Bill's an American football fan who went all in on the CFL for this season following the demise of the other spring leagues, and he sought out a longtime CFL fan to share this show with. So here we are. Welcome to episode 3 of the 3 Minute Warning. How's it going tonight, Bill?
Good. It's going great. It's it's been a lot of fun. This is my first season following the CFL. I've really I jumped head first right in. So I've really been enjoying the games that I've been watching. I've been enjoying the players and it feels kind of cozy. The CFL feels kind of cozy just because I don't know if it's the amount of teams or, you get to know the players a little bit more than bigger leagues. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's right on. I never thought that could be an advantage, but it's true. For a new fan, it becomes pretty easy to get to know the star players and the different teams and their character and whatnot. It's a busy weekend in football. I mean, we had the big start of the NFL this weekend and college into, a few weeks in. How much football did you watch this weekend?
Well, I watched the CFL and I watched the Miami Dolphin New England Patriot game, which Miami is my team, and bits and pieces of other games. But the CFL, I've watched each game twice, so.
Bill, that's incredible, man. I'm just so happy to be doing this with you. And I think it is so cool that you and I are here together, trying to share, the CFL with other fans and fans on your side of the border that could get into the league and see what a great league the CFL is. So I think it's really cool we're doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. And as I said, I've jumped head first. I mean, I'm still learning things.
You're wearing an Argos cap.
Yeah.
So you've ordered that. Did you have to pay $50 shipping to get it to you?
Don't tell my wife.
Oh, I don't want to hear how bad our Canada Post is. That's terrible.
Right. No.
I love seeing it.
So yeah, I put my money into the CFL. So there you go.
Way to represent. Nice. So Bill and I were thinking we'd blast through a little bit of CFL news before we get into reviewing the games this week and then previewing this coming week. So we're going to talk about some interesting events. There have been some things happening this week, particularly in Toronto.
Yes, absolutely. There's interesting development. I saw that Chris Jones, who I had no idea who that was. He's a well-known CFL personality and a defensive coach. He was headed to Toronto to help out the Argonauts, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I was just surprised because, Toronto's defense has been performing so well, especially on defense. They didn't seem like they needed help. And what more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, well, that was really interesting. So Chris Jones has been away from the CFL. He actually took a coaching job at his home high school. I was excited about that. Just it looked like he was maybe going to be out of the league for a little while. Last with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where he was kind of given all of the keys to almost the franchise, as general manager, head coach, defensive coordinator. And he is a defensive legend in this league, but a character who has elicited strong responses from players and pundits and fans for his strong and unique personality. But so there's this report, and actually I think it was him that had said that he had resigned from that high school coaching position and was headed to Toronto. And then talk started, and Toronto's defense has been outstanding this year with a relatively new coordinator, Glenn Young, but who has run an awesome system. And with a relatively young coaching staff under head coach Dinwiddie, they've got Rich Stubler as a defensive assistant. Now, Stubler, even before Chris Jones, is one of the defensive masterminds of the CFL. Stubler's coached with many teams around the league, both as a coordinator and head coach. Is in his elder years, and so I think was really brought on as much of a coaching mentor as much as a defensive assistant. And so at first there was some wondering, is Rich Stubler, kind of thinking he's had enough. Maybe Chris Jones is going to come in as an assistant. And this was Sunday night. And then on Monday morning, Coach Young and Coach Joshua Bell, a defensive backs coach in Toronto, their names were no longer on the website. So people know something is up, but it doesn't make sense because Toronto's being so good on defense. And then Dave Naylor from TSN tweeted that let us know that those two coaches were not at practice, and noted that this is at the same time that MLSE, that's the body that owns the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey and all of the sports franchises, the Raptors here, TFC, and the Argonauts, that MLSE brought in a staff policy of required vaccinations. And so we've talked in the past, the players have a collective bargaining agreement where that hasn't quite been worked out. So there are unvaccinated players, but the teams themselves are able to institute their own policies. So anyway, there's speculation that these two coaches were not yet vaccinated, and everybody's waiting for a statement of the team. And it came out that those two coaches are on leave for personal reasons, and personal decisions would determine their return. So there was no official announcement about Chris Jones. The Argos announced that Rich Stubler would call the defense this week, although we might look for an official Jones announcement happening in the coming days or early next week. He would have to clear quarantine anyway, so he wouldn't have been able to be on the sidelines for this game on Friday night anyway. But it was a storm in the CFL world with that news from Chris Jones.
Absolutely, yeah. I was surprised to hear that. So, and we had some other news, CFL COVID news. Unfortunately, this is the way our world is right now. The Montreal Alouettes head coach Khari Jones tested positive for COVID. So that's the Alouettes are going to be without Khari Jones this weekend, and at least their last game, they were on it. They were really good on offense and defense. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and you really hope that's not a big hurdle for them after finally getting their momentum and their mojo last week. Exciting to see, but I guess the great news about that is the entire team, players and staff, were all tested. And nobody else tested positive. So that case of Coach Jones appears to be isolated, and a breakthrough case as well that Khari Jones confirmed that he is double vaccinated. So unfortunate to see that, but it said he was almost asymptomatic. So hopefully he's in good health there and able to make a quick recovery, and that, this coaching staff behind him can take care of things this week. But they kind of were just starting to get on a roll. So that's maybe a bit of a blow to them, but I'm sure the team will be prepared.
Right. Yeah. They seem to be well coached from what I could see. So, some other notable headlines that we have is Cody Fajardo this week took limited first team reps for the Riders on Tuesday, and on Monday, David Watford ran with the number ones in Hamilton, but Jeremiah Masoli did practice in a backup role.
Yeah, really sad to see these quarterbacks going down, particularly in Hamilton, where in the offseason, I think the whole CFL was envious, where Hamilton clearly was coming into the season with two, top level starting quarterbacks in Dane Evans and Jeremiah Masoli, and now they're looking at both of them being injured, maybe long term. Like Masoli, they haven't said much. You remember Masoli started the first two games, and then Dane Evans came back and started the next game, and they said that Masoli was hurt, and people weren't sure if the team was trying to pull one on us or save face for him or whatever, but then news came out that he hadn't thrown since then. So he's got a serious injury, and now Dane Evans is out 4 to 6 weeks. So a little rough in Hamilton.
Yeah, I would say. And Dean Evans looked pretty good, the last 2 games, almost 2 full games. He's looked really solid. That's a big loss for them.
Yeah, he did. You never want to see these quarterback injuries from any player, any quarterback, of course, but these top players going down. It just really causes the game to suffer. Ottawa hasn't quite suffered the injuries that Hamilton has, but has struggled on the quarterbacking side of the ball. Do you think there's any chance we might see a quarterback from somewhere else in the league land in Ottawa or Hamilton?
It's very possible. I mean, I don't have much experience on the trades and how that works, but it seemed like they should do something. Ottawa, they just need help all over. Their offense is they just don't have a lot of playmakers right now. And, the Tiger Cats, they have a good team. They when we talked at the beginning here, they were like on the road to a possible, championship team. They were one of the top teams in the league coming in, besides Winnipeg. And I don't know. There are some guys out there that could be available. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, obviously, you think a couple teams right away. You think of Calgary right away, because we saw that Jake Maier appears to be a bona fide, well, maybe 3 games isn't large enough sample size, but he's the only quarterback to ever throw for over 300 yards in his first 3 games.
Yes, that's amazing when you think about it. You think about the quarterbacks that have been in the CFL. We're talking about Warren Moon. We're talking about Doug Flutie.
Yeah.
First 3 games, 300 yards passing. That's pretty amazing.
It really is. So you think one of those teams could at least make a call to John Hufnagel and ask. And now, of course, Bo Levi Mitchell is back, or was back this last game and started. And you have to think that, and I don't think there's any moving on. This is Bo's team, but what they saw of Maier, you would think that they're thinking he is their future and Bo Levi's heir. And yet, John Hufnagel and Dave Dickenson are such good scouts and developers of quarterbacks that it might be just like them to say to the rest of the league, we can find and develop quarterbacks almost at will. And maybe they do send one because it's to the other division. So there isn't that same concern. So the other team I was thinking was Toronto, because they kind of have 2 bona fide starters as well. Would they make a call and ask about McLeod Bethel Thompson, who's definitely had his opportunities to seize the reins in Toronto, and the team seems to be under Arbuckle right now. I'm not sure if Toronto would make that move. There's just too much information that would go a short ways down the road with them meeting up twice more. And I think McLeod Bethel Thompson's character is a big part of the reason why he would stay in Toronto too. He is just seems like a total team guy. And of course, he wants to be a starting quarterback, but fine in his backup role as well. So, but that's somebody else you think might be a possibility. And you were an XFL fan. Taylor Cornelius is the backup in Edmonton. Maybe Hamilton or Ottawa might be interested in a look at him, even though he hasn't had pro experience in the CFL. He's been a pro, and there's some tape. And when you've struggled like Ottawa has, I think you're looking for. You're looking for whatever's out there.
Or spark. They did get a spark with Davis when he came in, but
yeah, and that's true. And it's unfair of us to malign Dominique Davis. You're right, and you noted that they have problems all over at personnel positions, all over the place. I think their offense might have been the best it's been all year in this game against BC this last week, and yet still they're missing a lot of pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Just a little bit of other news. The Derek Moncrief signing in Edmonton was big. A player formerly played with Saskatchewan, and many people thought that he might end up there because Saskatchewan is playing a rookie in that position. And Rider fans were really disappointed. But I'll tell you, Elks got a gem in Derek Moncrief. He was just activated onto the roster for this week's game. He'll be playing at the Sam linebacker position. And I didn't realize, I've been down on Edmonton all year. They are allowing the fewest yards of any defense in the Canadian Football League.
That's an interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and they've given up points to first downs, but they're like by 30 or 40 yards, I think. Or maybe it's passing yards, but they're already a really solid defense on the back end, and to add Moncrief will both, as a Sam linebacker, both kind of being on the front seven and the back end at the same time. That is a dynamic impact player. A little bit of injury news this week, too. Most of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers got first practice off this week, it looks like. I guess they're pretty banged up, but a lot of key players didn't practice. But of note, Nick Dembski has missed 2 full practices this week. So you have to wonder about his status.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because
that's a big one. And another
2 is a lot. I don't know how it works in the CFL since they start on Fridays most of the time. But NFL, you get to that Wednesday practice and you don't practice Wednesday, you don't practice Thursday. That Friday is really important. So I guess CFL, it's more like the Wednesday.
Yeah, you're right. It's usually, and the CFL schedule shifts so much, but it's usually like day 1, 2, 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or it could be backed up with that early game. But yeah, that's a big one for Winnipeg. Nick Dembski's been playing his best ball ever. He had a heck of a game this last weekend. And then in BC, Lamar Durant has missed 2 practices again. And he missed the last game, but I think people have been wondering if we might see him back on the field this week. And it seems like maybe not. So yeah. All right, well, why don't we take a closer look at the games of this last week? Not quite the explosion of points that we saw the week before on the Labor Day weekend. We're back to the under trend, maybe. Although I guess, one game was up there. But the weekend opened with a defensive battle in Toronto, and the Argos kind of got their revenge on the Ticats, squeaking out a win right at the end, 17-16. What did you think about that one?
Well, squeaking out a win is definitely accurate because, when this game started, I'm like, okay, this is a different Toronto offense that's on the field because they were moving the ball and they got up, and I don't know what happened, to be honest. There was the interception in the end zone that looked like it should have been caught. That was deflected, and then there was a second interception by Arbuckle that he should have just thrown away. And I have a feeling that interception happened because of inexperience. I know he hasn't played a ton of games, but he's got to learn. When you're in trouble, you can't just throw the ball, just heave it out of bounds, and that's what I noticed is the defense played a lot better for most of the game, but they squeaked out a win. That missed extra point at the end, it was like unbelievable because I felt like Toronto was going to lose this game towards the very end. They lost momentum totally, and I thought they were going to lose this game.
Yeah, and you're so right. And that interception, that second one that you talked about, where Arbuckle just kind of threw it off his back foot, a really ill-advised throw, almost cost them the game, or at the very least sent them to overtime, you would have thought. That was a 32-yard field goal. Convert attempt that would have tied the game. So that's those longer convert attempts that we have. Makes the game a little more interesting, although kickers should still be 95% on those, but every once in a while they miss. There was one interesting thing on that one. Do you know who was the holder for Hamilton on field goals until 10 minutes before that? Dane Evans.
Dane Evans.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So And I don't know if the hold was a factor or not. It may have just
Right.
been a bad kick, but you know, you always got to wonder that timing between snapper, holder, and kicker is so important. But anyway, it was a shame to see Dane Evans go down for sure. But yeah, reviewing that game, and sorry, this is a little Toronto centric, being CFL fans in Toronto.
Hmm.
But looking at the Argos, absolutely the great play from the front seven. I mean, that defensive line, you know, and had a lot of new names. Let's not forget that they in the offseason went and signed two like CFL stars and veterans in
Hmm.
Cordaro Law and Drake Nevis. They've been on the injured list all year. And so they've had to have these guys step up. Sean Oakman, Eli Harold, Dwayne Hendricks have all been playing really well. And
Oh yeah.
Charleston Hughes unable to go, and guys are just stepping it up. You Robbie Smith and Sam Achampong all contributing. And then that linebacking core behind them that we've talked about that is just so outstanding, and how creative they get finding ways to get four linebackers on the field quite often, because they have this wealth of Cam Judge and Dexter McCoyle both at the will position, and finding ways, because those two are both so good to be on the field. So that defense was so strong. On the other side of the ball, well, first to special teams, I loved the insertion of Chandler Worthy. I had mentioned
Yes.
the 3.9 punt return average or whatever it was the Argos had been struggling with, and Worthy can break one. I mean, he showed he was really close, and then he got in on offense just for a few series or
Yeah.
touches, had a couple of good plays, and then one long one that just went through his hands.
Hmm.
So you've got to think that he might be able to stretch the field in a way that the Argonauts have struggled with a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, he was, if correct me if I'm wrong, but he was one of those cuts right before the season that they were like a little head scratching, because it was like, who's going to return the ball this year? Because there was people, you know, in the media that was like, yeah, he would have been a good returner, and it was questionable. It was questionable why he would, but he was definitely. They brought him in, and you saw the spark right away on all the returns.
Absolutely. Right
You
off
saw
the
a big
top.
difference. So there's no way they're going with him the rest of the season, and I think they just can mark that as a mistake, basically. You know, mistake
Yeah,
they
they really
made.
needed that. And you know what that I think maybe also contributed too. I think the two best receivers for Toronto was Ricky Collins Jr. and Curly
Mhm.
Gittens, who have been the two other return guys in addition to Braverman. And so they got a break from the return game, and they are both becoming a huge part of this offense. Ricky Collins on 2nd and 12 took a screen pass and made those 12 yards. He's become a real go-to guy in those second down situations. And then Curly Gittens Jr. just keeps seeing the ball a little more every week, and is
Mhm.
working into this offense. You know, and it's so easy to just focus on Tavares Daniels and Eric Rogers because they are two of the best receivers in this league. But I really like how Toronto is spreading the ball out and really looking to that field side of the offense, to those receivers as well. And then using DJ Foster as
Yes.
creatively as they have in space, both carrying the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield.
No, I had said for a few weeks they need to find ways, creative ways to get him involved, especially in the passing game. I mean, he led the receivers in yardage this week, only by a few yards over Ricky Collins, but yeah, he's an exciting player. You know, John White ran the ball awesome.
Did.
You know, they have some talent on offense. They just got to figure out how to use them and how to, you know, with we're into, I guess it's game 5. It was game 5 for Toronto. Got to start gelling here on offense. I think their defense is starting to come together. I think their offense has been the problem, and they just need to start gelling. So hopefully that's coming pretty soon.
Yeah, some of the struggles. I mean, it's a great win to beat Hamilton in this game, but a couple
Mhm.
disappointments. Uh, Dejon Brissett had a huge opportunity this week as a young receiver, a Canadian receiver, to start in a spot that is usually taken by an American receiver. And Toronto really tried to work him into the game, but he was the result of that first interception, which may have been as costly as the second because it was what should have been a touchdown catch.
Absolutely.
That was tipped into the defender's hands, and they kept going back to him, and he ended up without a catch. He had one that was called back by penalty, but on the stat sheet, he had no catches. I think they might have targeted him 5 or 6 times. That was really disappointing, particularly disappointing because I took him in fantasy, so that was a fail. And I'm curious to see if he starts in that spot again this week, if they go back to him, or if they look elsewhere. But I just hope he gets a second shot, and yet at the same time, you need to catch that touchdown pass.
Yeah, you need to catch the ball. Right.
So that was disappointing.
It was bad that
passing game. Sorry, go ahead.
It was bad enough that he didn't catch it, but to tip it up and it's intercepted, you lost out on any points at all. So
for sure. And that's a very costly mistake. Not getting the longer passing game going. I don't think Arbuckle had a completion over 20 yards. And he works the short game so well, and they're doing such great things with their 2 running backs. But at the same time, you need to be able to stretch the field once in a while, and they should be able to with Eric Rogers and Tavares Daniels and now Chandler Worthy as well. You have to think that they can hit one of these long balls, but they were coming up short there. And then really bad tackling was what let Hamilton back in the game in the second half. Like really bad tackling. So they're going to have to clean that up as well. Oh, and the block punt. Also ugly.
Yep. Special teams has been, troubling the last few weeks, especially with the return for the touchdown the previous week. And then the block punt here. They need to tighten that up a little bit. Tighten it up. So.
Yeah, and they did just bring in a pretty experienced fullback in Patrick Lavoie, who fullbacks are often special team specialists, and he plays that up back position on punt team. And though that position's been letting them down a little bit with those blocks getting through, so I'm not sure if there's any injury to Declan Cross or not. And I love Declan Cross as a player. He's one of my favorites, but they have been struggling with that up back blocking position on punt team. And so you wonder if maybe he's part of that. And I think actually they activated him already onto the roster. So I think we'll see him this week.
Okay. That'll be cool to see if we see a difference here. So any other thoughts about the game or?
Oh, lots, but we should probably move on.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Banjo Bowl.
Oh, yes, the Banjo Bowl. Well, quickly, the Banjo Bowl is Saskatchewan at Winnipeg. And you got to tell us a little bit about the Banjo Bowl. Why is this the Banjo Bowl?
That's great, Bill. Thanks for asking these great questions, because I know we're just part of the CFL podcast community, and yet I think we have a little bit of a different target audience with you and I doing this together, that we're trying to bring some new fans and American fans to the game. And so a lot of new fans listening. So as mentioned in the past last week, 3 of the Labor Day Classics, are almost always home and home games, where the following week they play in the other team's stadium. And Troy Westwood was a great place kicker for the Blue Bombers throughout the 90s, and coined this term. There was always, newspaper clippings, we'd call them or whatever, where players were making comments the week before, because they get jacked up. And we'll talk about the brouhaha that happened at the Banjo Bowl this week. But you could see that players get up for this game like it's a playoff game, even though it's just another game. And Troy Westwood made some quote calling the Saskatchewan Roughriders banjo picking inbreds. And, and it's Saskatchewan and Manitoba are both two of the prairie provinces in the CFL, and they're poking this kind of humor back at one another, back and forth, all the time. But that made it legendary. And then somebody was really creative and made an actual pretty impressive kind of trophy with a banjo on it. And ever since then, it's been called the Banjo Bowl, and it's added to that rivalry so much, where the Banjo Bowl is as big of a game now as the Labor Day game in Regina, where they both kind of have this equal footing. And I think that's unique to the Labor Day Classics, and that's credit to Troy Westwood for invoking that, and it has stuck ever since and is a part of this league's culture and history. But that's a great question.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So yeah.
And it boiled over this week. So we had Saskatchewan losing 33-9 in Winnipeg, and it was ugly on lots of levels. What did you think of that battle?
I thought just like I thought with Toronto and the Tiger Cats, we were going to get a different game, because even though it was in Winnipeg, I thought there was still a chance that, beating a team 2 weeks in a row is difficult. It's really tough. And I thought that, the Rough Riders would come out there and look a little bit different. Cody Vajaro's been really struggling of late, the last 2 games. I don't know if it's just Winnipeg or what it is, but they haven't been functioning the best on offense. I mean, their defense had been playing not terrible, but when you have, an offense and defense like Winnipeg, I mean, you're going to have to play your best, because they're one of the most well-rounded teams we have in the CFL. And I just think you can't make mistakes against this team, or it's going to hurt you. I know there were some, fights on the field, scuffles, or whatever you want to call it, pass interference calls that are like, where's that coming from? And there were some questionable things in this game. So, I don't know. I know we have Winnipeg. They're headed in the right direction as the best team in the CFL. And you have a big question mark now, because the Rough Riders were undefeated, and now they've lost 2 in a row, and Fajaro's a little nicked up. So,
absolutely, lots of questions there. I think you're so right. The wonderful thing is that there is such parity in the league that I think you're right. Winnipeg has shown that they are a step ahead of just about everyone else in the league. Coach Dickinson even said so in an interview for the Riders this week. But then after that, and of course, Ottawa has been terrible, but everybody else, I tried to do a power rankings, and everybody always hates everybody's power rankings and just thinks that they're completely wrong. But I tried to put the teams from 2 to 8 in some kind of order that felt right. And I'll tell you, it's an impossible task, because whoever you have at 2 and 3, and then you look at whoever you have at 7 and 8, you kind of think they're all about the same. They can all compete with each other. They can all beat each other.
Except for 9.
Yeah, well, exactly.
We'll cut them out. Yeah.
But the rest of them's tricky. Like you, I had to watch this one twice. Pretty passionate Rider fan at times. And so a lot of times you miss things on the first watch. I thought, I'm not going to say the Riders didn't get beaten soundly. Winnipeg took it to them. And at the same time, Saskatchewan was in this game for most of the game. And there were bright spots that I didn't realize until I watched it again. And so, even going in, what was it going into halftime? 9-6 or something. Sorry, I don't recall. But I mean,
they had a chance to tie it. They had a chance to tie it right before halftime, and they missed that field goal. And then I think, Winnipeg went down and scored again right before half. But
Yeah, and with that Winnipeg coming down, so I guess a couple of bad things.
Yeah.
This was a defensive battle in the beginning. Both defenses were playing really well,
Yep. Field
uh,
goals back and forth.
yeah, the Rider defense kept holding Winnipeg after the Rider offense kind of stalled. But actually it wasn't bad as it looks. It's just they were working, a pretty conservative offense. They were trying to get William Powell into the game, which we hadn't seen yet. And another shocking statistic, and actually that makes sense. Winnipeg is the worst run defense, like yards per down in the CFL.
That's another interesting
Another shocker,
statistic.
right? And
Yeah.
and that's because of that big game that Toronto took to them on the ground.
Hmm.
So, but Saskatchewan tried to really get William Powell involved, and actually he was running the ball pretty well by the end of the game. He won the battle against Andrew Harris. He was eight
Hmm.
for, I don't know, 88, and Harris was 8 for 80 or 11 for 80 or something like that, where he was just slightly better. And the offense stalled. Cody Fajardo wasn't super sharp, but I think some of that's credit to the Bombers. But they actually were moving the ball not too badly. They were just stalling and needing to kick field goals. So coming into halftime, this game was really close. And then the fracas happened.
Yep.
So a pass interference call took Winnipeg down to the 1-yard line again. And they scored a touchdown, and then everything blew up. And I can't believe that I'm going to complain about officiating. I need the world to know that no matter the team, if someone beside me starts saying we're getting screwed by the officials, I'm always the first one to say, no, we're not. Don't ever say that,
Hmm.
and to call out bias. There were some really questionable calls right before the half. So there was a huge dust up between the teams. Like all of the players were in it pretty much. And AJ Hendy and Garrett Marino were tossed for Saskatchewan on review. Absolutely appropriate. Okay, those guys probably deserved disqualifications. Marino did his best Hacksaw Jim Duggan impression, and Hendy, Hendy went and threw Jamarcus Hardrick to the turf. That's a big guy to go after.
Yeah.
Credit to Hendy, but anyway, so they both got tossed. But the thing that was really questionable is there were no disqualifications on Winnipeg's side. And Andrew Harris just ripped the helmet off of the defensive back Campbell with 2 hands and on the face mask. And then everything blew up after that. There were penalties assessed to Winnipeg, of course, but 2 disqualifications for Saskatchewan. None to Winnipeg, but it looked like Harris should have been disqualified as well. And usually when those things happen, officials even it out. And even 2-1 would have been understandable, but 2 players ejected on one side and none on the other. That didn't seem right to me. And then
that seems a little off.
Yeah, and then on the ensuing series, Saskatchewan's still trying to come back, and they drive the field and they throw a long ball, and there was a not pass interference not called, and Craig Dickinson threw the challenge flag, and it was reviewed. And really, I'm trying to shelve any Saskatchewan bias here, but in this replay, the defensive back, there's mutual hand fighting, tons of it, which is always fine. I never call that pass interference.
Yep.
But then the DB, after seeing the ball in flight, turns back to the receiver and looking in the receiver's eyes, basically not only runs into him and knocks him over, and the ball hasn't arrived yet, not even close. And he's got his hand right on his face mask at the same time. So Rider receiver spills, there's this challenge, and the ruling on the field stands. And I'll tell you, I was shocked. I just believe that gets called on the review, certainly 100% of the time. I couldn't believe it. And I will never, ever say that officials are to blame for the outcome, but that was a big point in this game, to say the least.
And the ones that do the review, that's in they call the command center. So they're the ones that decide if it's overturned or not.
That's right. And every camera angle and in slow motion. So I don't know if anyone's listening and wants to tell me what I'm missing, but That was pass interference, 100%.
In the NFL, they used to call that face guarding. You go towards the receiver. You're not playing the ball. You're playing the receiver and kind of go up in front of the receiver. I don't know if they call that anymore, but it used to be face guarding. It used to be called. So yeah.
And I guess in reflecting on it, I think had the throw been better, Saskatchewan would have gotten the call, but the throw was underthrown.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that the DB can run through the receiver, but I think because that ball was thrown behind, that may have been taken into consideration on that. But I found that really bewildering. But hey, we won't keep complaining about officiating because Winnipeg beat Saskatchewan fair and square. Zach Collaros was outstanding. I mean, so accurate. Yeah. 18 to 22 and no mistakes. He took what the defense gave him, took advantage of a couple of opportunities.
And his numbers could even be any better because 2 of those touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, are rushing touchdowns. 3 rushing touchdowns.
3 short yardage.
3 short yardage. He had 2 passing touchdowns. He could have had more easily. And missing 4 balls all game, 4 incompletions. He had a crazy good game. And I think that's overlooked a little bit. Because he's had a solid year so far, when so many quarterbacks have been up and down this year. He's been pretty solid. So
he has been. He's definitely making a case for MVP too, or MOP. I know Andrew Harris often gets that in Winnipeg, but he's been really, really good and just returned to that form he had, in 2018 or before when he was just such a sharp quarterback. And I don't want to take anything away from him, but Saskatchewan's secondary was a scrambled breakfast this week with injuries and then further injuries and ejections in that game. They were a real mess on that side of the ball with their two all-star halfbacks out of this game, in Gainey and Purifoy. And so they were missing them. They moved Blaise Brown from field corner into play halfback. They had 2 kind of untested rookie defensive backs playing in that game as well. So, I mean, that's an opportunity for Winnipeg to go after, but the secondary was not good. But, something interesting too, the Riders only punted 3 times to Winnipeg's 4. And that's another thing that shows that Saskatchewan's game wasn't as bad as it appeared. Now, they did have 2 late third down gambles as well that took away punts. But, Harker was actually really good. He was 10 of 13. I was a little bit disappointed with a couple of the carries given to Powell when Harker was in there, particularly on a second end. I don't know how long it was, but it was longer than 8 or, when that should have been a throwing situation. I'm not sure if Harker was running a run pass option there. Maybe he did have opportunity to throw, but I would have liked the coaches to have give him more of an opportunity to sling it, because he came out with 2 quick completions to Kyran Moore. Then he had a big run for 8 yards. Like, he was fired up and was making things happen. And it just didn't work out, and things, further went downhill in the second half. But Keon Schaefer-Baker, another really real bright spot for Saskatchewan with this apparent wealth of Canadian receivers. I mean, he was way down the depth chart behind these other guys, and he had 8 targets and 7 catches. So that's somebody you might want to look at for value for fantasy. He's really making a mark on that Saskatchewan offense.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll head to our second game of our triple header. And it was Calgary headed to Edmonton. And this was another game that was a rebound match from the previous week. It was in Calgary, and Edmonton was like awesome in that game. Well, we get Calgary 32, Edmonton 16. Is the return of Bo Levi Mitchell and Andrew Harris just laid an egg.
Trevor Harris, yeah.
Yeah, Trevor Harris laid an egg because the previous week he was the best quarterback, almost the best quarterback of the week. I'm really confused about Edmonton's offense because they have some pretty solid receivers out there, and some guys weren't even targeted until like the fourth quarter. It seemed like kind of crazy to me. I know Calgary struggled too. I mean, Bo Levi was off. He didn't look great at times. Throwing an interception. There was an interception return to the touchdown. But Greg Ellingson is the one I'm talking about. He only had 4, targets in that game, but he had 1 target leading into the fourth quarter. I just don't understand how one of your best receivers isn't targeted until you get to the fourth quarter. I don't. This has been a very up and down Edmonton team, so I don't really have a take on them. They could be the best team in the league or the worst. It's hard to tell. So what is your take on this game?
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. I just have to say that I can't figure these two teams out.
Mhm.
I don't know who they are, and partly maybe playing each other 2 weeks in a row doesn't help any. But yeah, just Calgary couldn't, and they won this game with a lot of points, but they kind of looked bad. Bo Levi
Yep.
Mitchell was really off with his receivers, like errant balls that I've not seen him throw very often before, being such an accurate passer. So there was a communication and timing issue there. And he had some communication issues with his coach as well. You don't usually see 2 very emotional coaches
No.
and players. So sort of unsurprising that it's not like that was totally out of character, but there was a lot of emotion between Coach Dickinson and Bo Levi Mitchell on the sidelines as they were both frustrated that they were struggling. And Bo, or the offense, I should say, took 2 time count violations. That's what we call it in CFL, 2 time count violation. And yet we have this sense that they're not very good. They had 10 knockdowns in the secondary. Calgary had 2. So very different defensive schemes too, I think, where Edmonton is just maybe dropping a lot of guys in coverage and really keeping the passing game underneath. But I don't understand the identities of these 2 teams. I think there are some bright spots on each side. Middle linebackers for both teams I think are really excellent. Darnell Sankey's great in Calgary, and Biera in Edmonton seems to be really excellent as well. And they've both got some really good defensive backs, but apparently they have some bad ones too. And Deshaun Amos is someone who I can't figure out which of those he is. He seemed to be one of the best new DBs in the CFL, and then had a really rough game. And so it's hard. One guy who is a star, though, 100%, is Kamar Jordan, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes. He had an awesome game. He had 12 receptions, 159 yards, and 1 touchdown. And let's talk about that touchdown, because that was real curious for me, because we're less than 20 seconds left in the game, and they go deep, score this touchdown. It's what I call running up the score. But is there? I know there's opinion of a lot of people that are like, you play until the final whistle goes. You play as hard as you can to the final whistle. And there are those that, you watch college games, and when somebody wins by 60, you think it's a little excessive. So is this like a playoff, advantage in points what is your take on that?
Yeah, and it could be. I actually am disappointed I didn't look into this because I meant to. But when that happened, at first I was like, "Oh my goodness, they're throwing a deep ball and running it up at this point in the game." If they play one another an equal number of times this season, because
Mhm.
it's that record versus that would be the first breaker, but then points for and against would be the second. So if they were to say play each other 4 times and each have 2 wins, then they would be looking to points. So I suspect that they probably play an even number of times. Otherwise,
Mhm.
I am shocked because I was sitting with my friends. We were watching the game. We were all just like, wow, I can't believe they just ran that. And maybe they just wanted to stick it in their faces too. Who knows? But
Well, you saw at the end of the game that Bo Levi was waving at the fans, goodbye.
how many fingers?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I didn't catch that, but yeah.
Yeah, lots of
But that's
bad blood
that
there
I
too.
take it that that's his personality. He's kind of arrogant, but he has the skills that he can be. But um, I'm not a huge fan of the things that I've seen, but it's good. It's good for the league to have your Luke Skywalker and your Darth Vader. It's good. It's good. It makes good entertainment.
Nice. Well, don't let anyone think that I got you not liking Bo Levi Mitchell. He did that all by himself, right, Bill?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's totally him. 100% him. I never heard you say a negative thing. He's not.
Right.
I think what it is I like him as a villain. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And
not like I
he's
dislike him. It's
outstanding. I
just
think his record is like 70-10 as a starter or something like that.
and he can throw the ball. The way he throws the ball is like you gotta admire that the way he can sling it. He just didn't do it so well the other day. So
Yeah, they just have so much swagger at that quarterback, and I mean quarterback position up to the general manager level, but
hmm
with Huff and Dickinson and Bo Levi, they've got swagger. They're confident. They believe in their team. They can, not afraid to talk it up. And so yeah, it's easy for Calgary and those quarterbacks and Bo Levi Mitchell to be the villain, and it's great. It's great for us as fans and great
yes,
for the
yeah,
league. But they're a great franchise and
absolutely,
great players. In fact, I will refuse to think that they're not good because they're always good. And they proved it in this game that they
yeah,
did
yeah,
take
yeah.
it to Edmonton after
As you
Edmonton beat
said,
them.
teams 2 through 8, you could insert anybody. It's almost like a puzzle. You could move them around and whatever. And at the moment, you're not wrong. You're not wrong because it's so close. One week somebody looks good, the next week they don't look so good. I mean, we don't have an idea how the playoffs are gonna match up here in week 6. So, except for the top team.
We got on Bo Levi for his lousy clock management. I see ours isn't very good either today.
Oh
Lots
yeah.
lots to say and talk about, but we should get
Oh
to
right.
Ottawa. Maybe we could just say Ottawa's terrible and Michael Riley is maybe the best quarterback in the CFL.
Yes. So we had the BC Lions 45, the Ottawa Red Blacks 13, and it was all BC all the time from the opening kickoff. Mike Riley has been incredible this year. He's been, as far as I'm concerned, he's been the best quarterback the first game he came in. And he gave it 100% in that first game. His arm wasn't there, but he was completed passes. His receivers were coming back to the ball. They might be the best receiving core in the league also. You got Lucky Whitehead, you got Brian Burnham.
There
They've
you
been
go.
Yeah, they've been pretty incredible. Lucky Whitehead has a missed field goal return for a touchdown. And I mean, all he does is make one cut and he goes down the sideline and there he goes. They're fun to watch. They're very fun to watch. Yeah, and I can't say and everybody out there, Dallas did some notes here in on this piece of paper. And the first thing for this game it says Ottawa sucks. That's his notes for for this game. So
they're gonna bounce back and win big this week, maybe. But yeah, and you know what? Like they have good coaches in Ottawa, so I think they should be able to figure this out. They're missing some
mhm.
pieces on the field, I think, but I'm glad you mentioned the missed field goal because that's a 119-yard missed field goal return. That's one of those plays, Bill, that I want you and I to share with our American listeners and viewers to check out. That Lucky Whitehead missed field goal return.
Oh yeah,
That is iconic CFL excitement and kind of quirkiness. Like
yeah.
that was so awesome, though.
And that's what you get when you have the goalpost there on the goal line. That's what you get. You can do it in the NFL. It rarely happens that you even get any kind of return. It's only if it's short. But the CFL, I've seen quite a few returns, on the missed field goal. This was the best one. This was incredible. BC was just on it. Every phase was on it in this game. So, but very entertaining. That's one of the things that you get in the CFL, like this 20-yard end zone, because you can do a lot of different things. Returns. You have you can get single points. So yeah, it's and this game was entertaining. I mean, unless you was like Red Blacks fan, probably wasn't mostly entertained. But I love to see, him throw the football. Mike Riley throw the football. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they
And he
are a
has
fun
some.
offense to watch.
Yes, and he does have some unique, fashion there. When you see interviews with him when he's not in.
Mike O'Reilly is a style icon for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite players in this league. I hope he wears the jersey of one of my two teams someday, but that's doubtful at this point. But
we'll see. You never
Mike
know.
O'Reilly's special.
So we head into.
You just go to fantasy?
Yeah. Let's do the fantasy. So I had a few fantasy studs this week. And one of them, you would never, I wouldn't in a million years guess, but it was Ryan Davis of the Ottawa Red Blacks. He had a 2,800 price point, and he had 29 fantasy points. That's incredible. That's incredible. My other one is Mike Riley, of course, 33.46. Brian Burnham, Lucky Whitehead, Lions defense, BC Lions all the way. Some fantasy duds, and Trevor Harris is up there because one week he scores like the most points for a quarterback or close to, and then the following week does nothing. So very, very interesting week. I don't know. I don't know. I doing this fantasy, and I started out, that's how you get to know the players and that sort of thing. And the big thing about it is these guys that just show up, have a week like this Ryan Davis has. Yeah, it's like, okay, where did that guy come from? Where's he been? And it's like, it's been pretty interesting. Kadeem Carey didn't have a great week in comparison. He only had 4.5 fantasy points, 8,400. There was a lot of disappointing players this week. So who do you like on this coming week? Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think. I mean, we're just talking about how good BC is, and we didn't get opportunity to talk about how good BC's defense is, and yet they need to make the long flight to Montreal. And I think that Vernon Adams Jr. finally got things going. I know they're going to be without their head coach on the bench, but maybe that fires them up too. I just believe that Montreal is going to show up strong this week. BC does have a couple young defensive backs on the field side, and so I like Winicky for Montreal this week. I think he's a really smart receiver that will be able to make use of all the space on that field side and respond to those less experienced defensive backs. I think Emmanuel Lewis is a good pick as well, because I think they'll be throwing the ball a lot. And then those value picks in Saskatchewan, not that I'm sure how they're going to do against Toronto this week, but I do imagine they throw the ball a lot. And Keon Schaefer Baker and Braden Lenius, who also had a big play in Winnipeg the other day and is proving to be a big part of that offense. I think those two guys, because they're going to be 2,500 or 3,000 or 3,500 maybe, could be some nice value picks. I'm not sure I would take Kadeem Carey. I think it's always picking offensive players in Calgary is really tough. They spread their ball out to those receivers so often. I think even just finally this week, it's been established that Kamar Jordan is their number one. But even before this week, was it Ambles? Was it Josh Huff? Mm-hmm. And those guys, they can have like 2 catches for 11 yards, or they could have 9 for 100, and it just seems you never know with Calgary. So I find Calgary guys tough to pick, but I think Carey, partly because they're playing Hamilton. I think Hamilton's got a pretty great run defense, particularly in the interior. So I wouldn't take Carey this week. And I'm not sure about Willie P in Saskatchewan either. Toronto is also a tough team to run against with their front seven. I think Saskatchewan will probably be looking to pass the ball, assuming that Cody Fajardo is a go. And even if not, it'll be a short passing game for Harker too, I think. So, and I'd probably stay away from Masoli. We don't even know if he's going to play, but
we don't know.
That's oddly, I mean, Hamilton is a team that sometimes runs the ball like 5 or 6 times in a game. Maybe they work the running game into their offense. I mean, they have 3 excellent running backs in Hamilton, so they could maybe tweak things there. But that's a big chance to take 2 to go at Don Jackson or Sean Thomas Erlington. But I'm not sure about Masoli, so we'll see what happens.
You can't go wrong with the BC receivers, at least.
It's true. Burnham and Whitehead are probably always worth it, and Riley too.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll get ready and wrap it up here. We have I'll just go over the games this coming week 7. Friday night we have Calgary at Hamilton. We have 2 games on Friday. The second game is Toronto at Saskatchewan, and then Saturday we have a doubleheader. Again, it's BC at Montreal and Winnipeg at Edmonton. So it should be some good games. Especially I'm looking forward to that BC Montreal game. That could be light up the scoreboard a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, it could. That could be a really great one with lots of points and lots of deep passes. And then on the other side, I think Toronto and Saskatchewan such an interesting matchup too, because we're trying to see who those 2 teams really are. And yet they both run a pretty short passing game. So that could be a defensive battle there, but really excited about these games this week too. And to see what Hamilton can do, whoever's under center, whether it's Watford, probably, and see if they can rally around the young, lesser experienced quarterback with the rest of their solid team and at home to pull out a win.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll get ready and get out of here. So we'll be back next Wednesday to talk about week 7, go over the news, and do a little fantasy. So it was a lot of fun tonight.
It was great. Thanks to all our fans and listeners out there. You can find all the games on ESPN Plus and TSN. And find our fantasy leagues, CFL Fantasy and CFL Pick'em, and join our leagues. We are 3 Minute Warning, a Canadian Football League podcast. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, see you later.